After this scene at the end of last week's amazing Jujutsu Kaisen episode, I think many of us were thinking Megumi would probably be the one who would be one of the characters who ended up dead. I personally didn't think it was going to be the main character, and the main character would end up being hostage for the antagonist of this anime. And while yes, it seems like he's coming back, it was still an unexpected turn of events that had me a little shook because honestly, they had me for a few minutes. I was leaning on Yuuji coming back in some way, but they did commit enough that I was curious because really, you have someone like the main big king of curses, he really doesn't need Yuuji. So I was thinking, is he actually going to stay dead? Are we going to actually switch main characters? It wouldn't be the first time I've seen an anime literally kill off its main character to switch to another one. And because of how good characters like Megumi actually are, I think it would have worked, but I'm not gonna lie, I am very happy to see Yuuji gonna be alive and well, because the clashing ideals of Megumi and himself I think is really interesting. One, really wanting to save everyone, where you have someone like Megumi who saves people unequally, and that's a really interesting theme that I really want to dive into. I thought it was quite interesting last week with the clashing of ideals, but this week you really get to see inside his perspective, because people could really question, why would you save someone who is harnessing the King of Curses? If anything, that should be someone you'd want to kill, especially considering you don't want to save prisoners because of the actions that they committed. And he's someone who views people as good or evil, sort of a situation. If he looks at someone and thinks they're good, even if they literally are a ticking nuclear bomb, at the end of the day, if he views them as good, even if they have something so negative like the King of Curses inside your head, he wants to save them unequally. And that's something that I really like seeing a character in a battle shonen style series say, hey, I do things unequally and I will wear that like a medal of honor. You don't have to understand, you don't have to agree, but I will choose who I save, and even if it gets me in trouble or people push back against it, that's how I view how it's going to happen. And the interesting thing is, before Yuji's death, before obviously the end of the episode, he's someone who is kind of proud of Megumi for being yeah, your ideals aren't wrong, nor are mine. And obviously, whenever they do get reunited, if they do get reunited sooner rather than later, I think those clashing of beliefs are really going to play a major importance, and I'm really excited to see what they do with that. This episode was definitely thrilling. I mean, you can't say Jujutsu Kaisen is anything other than exhilarating, in my honest opinion. I think the idea of taking the main character hostage by ripping out his heart, throwing it on the grass, saying, I don't need this to live, but this boy does. So Megumi's idea to make him think he needs to use his full power, he needs to have the heart in his body in order to beat him, is a good way, and I thought honestly was going to work out in his favor. I thought the idea of a death was going to be a bluff, and you might be able to argue it is a bluff if he does die and come back. It's kind of like, it's true, but it's not true sort of a situation. But I did like the idea because even though it was hurting him, he was still at pretty insane power. So if you could convince the King of Curses that you're really powerful and he needs the heart in order to beat you, that way, when Yuuji does come back, he would be able to take over and not die. I firmly believed our boy was going to be able to do so. It looked like he had the resolve, it looks like he had the confidence, and I thought maybe somehow do a battle shonen move where he would pull power out of his ass and he would save the day. And that didn't happen. Something you have to give credit to Jujutsu Kaisen is a lot of what you see at surface level is things we've seen before. I've seen a lot of comparisons from Bleach as an example, or Yu Yu Hakusho, things like that. A lot of the ideas when you pick apart the main character being possessed, or the idea of sorcerers and curses and things like that, the school that trains these people, we've seen all these ideas done before, but the way they're mixing them and the way they're executing scenes such as Megumi literally losing, and then you have of course Yuuji dying, even if it's temporary, it's still something that feels different. And I think with the high quality production that MAPPA's delivering it really elevates those scenes that you may initially want to push back against into something you haven't seen. So then when you get into those later episodes, you don't really look at it as something we've seen before, but rather you look at it as Jujutsu Kaisen. And that's a really strong point for this series, I have to say. And honestly, out of all the episode's conclusive endings, I would have to say this one has the most potential to truly change this show into something really, really different, especially with that sort of meetup. And as we go into the heart wound there, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But I mean, the idea of death in this series, I think, is really interesting because you can argue, well, for these characters, they really did just meet the guy, so they would be sad, but how broken are they truly going to be? and both of which are quite distraught. Even though one's trying to play it tough, she's really crying and biting her lip, where another feels like he's a disappointment to someone who he truly believed was a good person and deserved a life, and he shouldn't have had to give it for basically people who are just prisoners, and they never should have had to deal with that. And it's interesting how they actually do touch upon that, because when we have the big man in charge come back after literally being pulled away, this was pretty much an assassination attempt. You know, he went against top chain of command's orders and was able to wing something that they didn't agree with, so they used that opportunity to take care of him, and even if others die in the process, it's kind of like two birds with one stone. What I didn't expect was for him to say, maybe I should kill all the higher ups. I was like, holy shit, that's something that I feel like is an actual likely possibility, and if our boy doesn't come back in a decent amount of time, that's an honestly likely scenario, and he is the most powerful, so I think he could do it without breaking a sweat. What was also quite fascinating to me was the idea of, like, why did this all happen to begin with? And we see that it was a test to see how powerful the King of Curses was, and we have this little meetup between Curses and someone who appears quite human, saying the only way you'll be able to win against the sorcerers is, one, you have to take out the most powerful, but two, you have to bring our main character and his kind of demonic friend over to your side. That's when it was like, okay, yeah, clearly they're going to do something. Is it going to be the same person? Because they always can do the idea of like revival, but his personality's a bit different, which could be interesting. But even if it's the exact same, depending on how much control Sukuna actually does have, that could be a game changer, in my honest opinion. The fight between him and Megumi I thought was amazing. I love seeing the idea of the curses. Anytime they show me curses, I get giddy. I think they look beautiful, and the idea of like using shadows as an example to create these beasts I think is cool. What was actually really interesting to me was the idea that he was actually impressed by Megumi. He wasn't using the traditional way of summoning, and when he asked him like, why did you run away? It really says to me that Megumi has more potential than maybe he even realizes. If the King of Curses is impressed, and if only you harnessed it, things could have been quite different. And that's very interesting to me, and I'm excited to learn more about his abilities and how powerful he actually is in the grand scheme of things. Overall, I thought this episode was exhilarating. It was action-packed. It had me sweating even momentarily for our main character, and while some people may say it could be a cop-out to say, oh, a character dies, but then they actually come back, when you have the King of Curses inside you, I don't think it's completely unbelievable to say that the main character could find a way to be revived, especially if he's been swallowing cursed fingers. Curses in this series clearly has a lot of potential. If he's able to lose an arm and a curse can regain it, it's not impossible for a curse to revive you, especially if the King of Curses is deep inside your consciousness and things like that. I definitely think the production still remains to be unmatched in a lot of ways. MAPPA is one of those studios that I think when they really get their heads down and focus, they turn a manga. I think they really have only ever done manga in originals. I don't know of any light novels, but in terms of their manga adaptations, you can really compare most of it to like they take those panels and they truly bring them out to their best potential. Not flawlessly, no studio is flawless, but I do think MAPPA is one of those studios that impresses me the most with how they continue to reinvent the wheel of what their designs are. While the traditional character designs, they kind of feel consistent throughout MAPPA projects, I honestly feel like each style of anime overall feels different and not just like, oh, you can look at this as always an A1 Pictures show. MAPPA to me definitely has a style and feel that just feels like you, at first, if you didn't know it's MAPPA, you're not always sure if it is MAPPA because of how many times they reinvent the wheel. And I think shows like Jujutsu Kaisen really benefit from that because you can make a style that works so flawlessly for the story rather than just using a studio's template that they use time and time again. With how many different styles of anime they adapt, it's a really great benefit in their favor. Overall though, let me know your thoughts and feelings on what you thought about episode 5 of Jujutsu Kaisen and where you think it might go next week. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like to show your support and hit that subscribe button if you happen to be new around here. So until next time everyone, please take care and have a good one.